The wind blew across the empty plains, carrying with it the scent of dust, pine, and gunpowder, a strange mixture that spoke of a land both wild and wounded. The sun was setting low, painting the horizon with streaks of golden red, and the man riding into the valley looked as if he'd been born from that same twilight, half light, half shadow. His name was Luke Carver, though few in the West remembered it anymore. He had no home, no kin, no past that he cared to tell. Folks just called him the Drifter. He rode into Redemption, a near-dead town clinging to life by whiskey and willpower. The wooden sign that once welcomed travelers leaned sideways, bullet holes marking its years of misery. The saloon had its windows boarded, the church bell hung cracked and silent, and weeds grew between the cobblestones where once wagons rolled with purpose. Redemption had seen its better days, and so had Luke. He tied his horse outside the sheriff's office, though there hadn't been a sheriff in years. The door creaked when he pushed it open. Dust filled the air like ghost breath. There were old wanted posters on the wall, some faces crossed out, others faded away. He leaned against the counter and saw a letter, unopened, lying there with his name written across the front in fine penmanship. It stopped him cold. No one wrote to Luke Carver. Not in years. He tore the envelope open, the paper yellowed from time. The handwriting was neat but shaking, the kind of script that comes from a dying hand. Greater than, to Luke Carver. If you find this letter, it means I'm gone. You won't remember me, but I remembered you, boy. You did right by my brother once, saved his wife and child back in Abilene. He never forgot, and neither did I. I'm leaving you Redemption, the whole damn town, every acre and every broken building. Maybe you can bring life back to what I couldn't. Silas Marin. Luke stared at the words, his brow furrowed. Silas Marin, he remembered that name from a lifetime ago. A rancher who had lost everything to greed and fire. They'd met once, years back, when Luke still cared enough to fight for others. Now that man seemed like a ghost too. He folded the letter slowly and stepped outside. The wind picked up again, scattering dry leaves across the street. A few locals watched him from doorways, their eyes narrow, wary. Strangers weren't trusted here, and drifters even less so. At the far end of town stood the Marin estate, a wide ranch house, its paint peeled and its fences broken. Luke rode there as the sun disappeared behind the hills. The key still fit the front door, and the house smelled of time gone stale. He found another letter on the dining table, along with a bottle of whiskey and a deed signed in his name. It was true. He owned Redemption now. He poured himself a glass, drank deep, and looked out the window at the silent town. In the distance, a single light flickered from the saloon, the only sign of life. He could have ridden away then, left the ghost town to rot. But something about the place, and the memory of Silas Marin's dying words, held him there. The next morning, he walked the streets, meeting the townsfolk one by one. There was Clara Hensley, who ran the saloon and kept her shotgun loaded beneath the bar. There was old Doc Porter, who hadn't treated a real patient in months. And there was a boy named Eli, who carried a slingshot and looked at Luke like he was some kind of hero from a dime novel. "You really own the town?" Eli asked, eyes wide. "So they'd tell me. What are you gonna do with it?" Luke thought for a long moment before answering. Make it worth fighting for. But not everyone wanted Redemption reborn. 3 days after Luke's arrival, riders came down from the north. 6 men in black dusters bearing the mark of the Ridge Company, a land syndicate run by a ruthless man named Barrett Ridge. He'd been buying up dying towns for years, turning them into mining outposts and rail stops. Redemption was next on his list. Their leader, a cruel-eyed man named Cole Vance, dismounted in front of the saloon and spat in the dust. "We hear there's a new owner," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tell him Barrett Ridge sends his regards, and an offer." Luke stepped out from the saloon's swinging doors. "He can keep his regards." Cole smiled thinly. Didn't figure a drifter would stand in the way of progress. I'm not standing in the way, Luke replied. I'm standing for what's left. The men laughed, but they didn't laugh long. When Cole reached for his revolver, Luke was faster. 2 shots cracked the silence, sending birds scattering from rooftops. Cole's gun fell to the dirt, and the crowd gasped. Luke's weapon never wavered. Tell Ridge, Luke said coldly, if he wants this town, he'll have to take it the hard way. The riders left, swearing vengeance. And just like that, Luke Carver had declared war. The next weeks turned redemption from ghost town to fortress. Luke gathered the willing, Clara, Doc Porter, Eli, and a handful of ranchers still loyal to Marin's memory. They repaired fences, fortified the saloon, stocked ammunition, and trained with what weapons they had. Luke taught them how to shoot straight, how to move silent, how to hold their ground. At night, he sat on the porch of the Marin house, staring at the stars. He'd seen too many wars, too many graves, but this one felt different. Maybe because it was his now, his town, his people, his fight. On the 12th night, smoke rose from the northern ridge. Barrett Ridge himself was coming, with 30 hired guns and a promise to burn redemption to ash. The morning was quiet before the storm. Luke stood in the middle of Main Street, his rifle slung low, his hat casting shadow over his eyes. Clara loaded shells beside him. The townsfolk took their positions in windows, behind barrels, behind doors. Eli gripped his slingshot, trembling but ready. When the riders appeared on the horizon, the earth trembled under their hooves. Ridge rode at the front, a silver-bearded devil in a black coat, his eyes cold as steel. Carver, Ridge bellowed as his men spread across the field. You think you can stop progress? You're just one man. Luke's voice carried steady through the wind. Maybe, but one man can still draw a line. The battle that followed was brutal. Gunfire echoed between the buildings. Windows shattered, horses screamed, dust rose thick as smoke. Luke fought like a man possessed, moving from cover to cover, his shots clean and true. Clara held her ground at the saloon, blasting anyone who came near. Eli ran messages, docking bullets that bit the air around him. Hours passed like minutes. Ridge's men fell one by one, their confidence bleeding away with every loss. But redemption bled too. The church caught fire. Doc Porter was shot through the shoulder. The Marin house was hit by dynamite, shattering its windows into rain. At last, Ridge himself rode forward, pistol drawn. He fired wildly, grazing Luke's side. Luke dropped to one knee but kept his aim steady. 2 men facing each other across the burning ruins of a town. You could have sold, Ridge snarled. You could have had money, comfort, hell, a place in the world. Luke's reply was quiet, final. I've got one now. He fired. Ridge fell, his horse bolting into the smoke. When the dust cleared, redemption stood, but barely. The saloon was half burned, the sheriff's office riddled with holes, and the air smelled of blood and victory. The townsfolk gathered in the street, silent, staring at Luke. For the first time in years, there was no fear in their eyes, only respect. Clara stepped forward. You did it, Luke. He shook his head. We did it. They buried their dead at dawn. The rising sun cast light over the graves, gilding the headstones with gold. Luke stood apart, hat in hand. He knew he couldn't stay forever. Drifters never did, but for now, redemption was alive again. Weeks passed. The town began to rebuild. New wagons arrived, trade routes reopened, and laughter returned to the streets. Luke spent his days fixing fences, mending roofs, and teaching Eli how to ride and shoot. One evening, Clara found him packing his saddle. You're leaving, she said softly. He nodded. This town don't need a drifter anymore. It's got its own heartbeat now. She looked at him for a long moment, eyes shining in the sunset. Where will you go? He smiled faintly. Wherever the road ends next. As he mounted his horse, Eli ran up, breathless. "You'll come back, won't you?" Luke reached down, ruffling the boy's hair. "Maybe someday, but you remember, kid, the town's yours to fight for now." And with that, he rode out into the open plains, the wind at his back, the horizon wide before him. Behind him, the town bell rang for the first time in years, a sound not of mourning, but of rebirth. Some say Luke Carver was last seen near the border, helping settlers fend off bandits. Others say he vanished into the desert, swallowed by the same dust he came from. But in redemption, they still tell his story, the drifter who inherited a dying town, and fought not for gold or glory, but for a place to finally belong. Because sometimes, the Wild West didn't just take, it gave. And sometimes, one man's fight could bring a town back to life.